The cafe was nothing special. A small, unassuming spot tucked between a laundromat and a stationery store. I hadn't planned to be there that day, but the rain had started pouring, and I needed shelter. Sitting at a corner table, I stirred my coffee absent-mindedly, watching the world blur outside the fogged-up window. That's when I saw her. She walked in like she owned the room, though she wasn't flashy or loud. There was something about her, a quiet confidence, perhaps. Her hair, streaked with silver, framed a face with stories in every line. Her eyes, sharp and knowing, scanned the room briefly before landing on an empty table near mine. She ordered a cup of tea, her voice soft yet commanding, and then sat down with a book. Something about her made it impossible to look away. I told myself it was curiosity. She reminded me of someone I couldn't quite place. "You're staring," she said suddenly, not looking up from her book. Her voice startled me. "Sorry, I didn't mean to." My words trailed off as she finally met my gaze, a playful smile tugging at her lips. "Don't apologize. It's rare to find someone who isn't glued to their phone nowadays." She closed her book and leaned back slightly. "Do you always spend your afternoons people watching?" I chuckled nervously. "Only when it's raining and I forget my umbrella." Her laughter was soft and melodic. "Fair enough. I'm Evelyn, by the way." "James," I replied. Our conversation began casually, but there was an ease to it that felt different. We spoke about books, the weather, and how the city had changed over the years. She had a way of making every word seem significant, as if she were unearthing truths I hadn't realized I carried. The rain stopped, and so did our conversation. She glanced at her watch and stood, smoothing the hem of her coat. "Well, James, it was nice meeting you." "You too," I said, feeling an odd pang of disappointment as she walked out. I sat there for a while, staring at the empty chair she had left behind, wondering why a stranger could make me feel so alive. The next time I saw her, it wasn't by accident, at least not entirely. I'd returned to the cafe hoping to see her again. She wasn't there. Disappointed, I wandered into the bookstore next door, pretending to browse. That's when I spotted her in the corner, flipping through a leather-bound novel. "Evelyn," I said, surprised by how her name felt on my lips. She looked up, her eyes lighting up with recognition. "James, twice in 1 week, what are the odds?" I shrugged, trying to appear casual. "Guess this neighborhood has its charms." We spent the next hour talking about books. She had a passion for classic literature, quoting lines from Jane Eyre and The Great Gatsby with ease. I felt out of my depth, but she didn't seem to mind. As we parted ways, she handed me a small slip of paper, her number. "Call me sometime," she said, her tone teasing yet sincere. That night I couldn't stop thinking about her. The way she spoke, the way she moved, it was intoxicating. My wife, Emma, was sitting across the living room, engrossed in her phone. I stared at her, trying to summon the same spark I'd felt years ago, but it wasn't there. I told myself that Evelyn was just a distraction, nothing more. But deep down, I knew I wanted to see her again. Our first outing felt innocent enough. Evelyn had invited me to a gallery opening, a small event featuring local artists. I lied to Emma, saying I had to work late. The guilt gnawed at me, but I ignored it. Evelyn was waiting outside the gallery, her dress simple yet elegant. When she smiled at me, the world seemed to shift. The evening was a blur of art and conversation. Evelyn had a way of making everything feel vibrant and alive. We stood close, our shoulders brushing, and I felt a thrill I hadn't experienced in years. As we left the gallery, she touched my arm lightly, her fingers lingering just a moment too long. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice low. I hesitated, wanting to say something profound, something that would capture the chaos in my mind. Instead, I nodded. When I got home that night, Emma was already asleep. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, staring at her peaceful face, wondering what I was doing. The messages started innocently enough. A joke here, a compliment there. But soon, they became more frequent, more intimate. Can't stop thinking about last night, she texted after one of our meetings. Neither could I. Evelyn and I began meeting regularly, always in secret. A quiet park, a dimly lit bar, her apartment. The first time we kissed, it felt like stepping into a storm. There was no going back. At home, the lies became second nature. I have a meeting, I'd say. Or, I'm going out with a friend. Emma didn't question me at first, but I could feel her growing distant. You've been distracted lately, she said one evening, her tone tinged with suspicion. Just work, I replied, avoiding her gaze. The truth was, I was falling deeper into a world I couldn't control. Evelyn was everything I didn't know I needed: passionate, unpredictable, and endlessly fascinating. But with every stolen moment, the weight of my choices grew heavier. The affair consumed me. Evelyn and I saw each other whenever we could steal a moment. Sometimes it was for coffee, sometimes for hours wrapped in each other's arms. Each encounter was a heady mix of passion and fear. We were playing a dangerous game, and I knew the stakes were rising. One night, Evelyn suggested we meet at a hotel. Are you sure? I asked, the weight of the suggestion making my chest tighten. She tilted her head, a sly smile curving her lips. Unless you're scared. Scared didn't even begin to cover it. The fear of being caught, of my lies unraveling, loomed over me constantly. But the pull toward her was stronger than reason. That evening, as I left the house, Emma stopped me at the door. Where are you going? She asked, her voice steady but her eyes searching. Work emergency, I said, my heart pounding in my chest. She nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. Okay, be safe. The guilt was unbearable as I walked away, but it vanished the moment I saw Evelyn waiting for me in the hotel lobby. The room was dimly lit, the city's lights casting patterns on the walls. Evelyn leaned against the window, a glass of wine in her hand. You look tense, she said, setting the glass down and stepping closer. I feel like I'm living two lives, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. She placed a hand on my chest, her touch both soothing and electrifying. Maybe it's time to decide which one you want more. Her words sent a chill through me. I didn't know what I wanted. All I knew was that being with her felt right, even if everything about it was wrong. The cracks in my marriage were becoming impossible to ignore. Emma had grown distant, her once warm smiles replaced by guarded looks. She didn't say much, but I could feel her watching me, sensing the shift in our lives. One evening, as we sat in silence over dinner, she finally spoke. James, is there something you need to tell me? I froze, my fork hovering midair. What do you mean? You've been different lately, she said, her voice calm but firm, distracted, secretive. I just want to know if something is going on. My mind raced, searching for an answer that wouldn't betray the truth. It's just work, I lied. There's a lot on my plate right now. She didn't look convinced, but she didn't press further. Later that night, I sat alone in the living room, staring at my phone. Evelyn had sent me a message, I miss you. I typed and deleted my response several times before finally writing, I miss you too. But the guilt was becoming harder to ignore. I was being pulled in two directions, and I couldn't keep pretending forever. Evelyn was waiting for me at our usual cafe, her face unreadable. She had been distant lately, her messages shorter, her tone cooler. Is something wrong? I asked as I sat down. She looked at me for a long moment before speaking. James, I can't do this anymore. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? I'm tired of sneaking around, of being your secret, she said, her voice steady but tinged with sadness. I need to know where this is going. I had no answer. I couldn't imagine a life without her, but the thought of leaving Emma felt equally impossible. Evelyn, I just need more time, I pleaded. She shook her head. I've given you time, but you need to make a choice, me or her. Her ultimatum hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. That evening, as I walked into the house, Emma was waiting for me in the living room. "We need to talk," she said, her voice trembling. My heart sank. She held out a small piece of paper, one of Evelyn's notes that I must have forgotten in my pocket. "Who is she?" Emma asked, tears welling in her eyes. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. The truth was out, and there was no escaping it. The fallout was devastating. Emma's heartbreak was palpable, and her trust was shattered. "I gave you everything," she said through tears. "How could you do this to us?" I had no defense. I had been selfish, chasing a fleeting passion without thinking of the consequences. Evelyn, too, was hurt. When I told her about the confrontation with Emma, she pulled away. "I thought you were different," she said, her voice heavy with disappointment. "But you're just as lost as I am." In the end, I lost them both. Emma filed for divorce, unable to forgive the betrayal. Evelyn moved on, tired of waiting for a man who couldn't commit. I was left alone, haunted by the choices I had made and the lives I had broken. Sitting in that same cafe months later, I stared at the empty chair across from me, the memories of Evelyn still vivid. She had been a whirlwind in my life, leaving destruction in her wake. But in that chaos, she had also shown me something I had forgotten: what it meant to feel alive. As the rain began to fall outside, I realized I would carry the scars of this affair forever. They were a reminder of the price of chasing forbidden flames.